great moment to just plant a seed, because I think as most of us have gone virtual for a lot of our teaching, and Ariel, you can just bring it back up as you need to. I think many of us have had these technical issues on and off. And I feel like I've been in the room I've co-taught with, or I've been a student in, or I've been the instructor sometimes that is like so frustrated that I'm forgetting that like my affect impacts the classroom. So, you know, it's not a bad practice. I literally have a Post-it note right behind the computer now that reminds me to take, you know, take deep breaths periodically when things aren't going as planned, remembering that the students are like a gift to the community. They don't need to necessarily carry my frustrations with inanimate objects, you know. So, you know, that kind of energy sometimes can transfer. And if a kiddo is already having a tough time at home or something like that, it can be invaluable to try to do what we can to process it later, but manage it in real time.
Okay, are we seeing gray boxes?
Yes, but it's better. So we'll just see how it goes. Is that all right with everyone? Great. The robots are doing what robots do.
So I think we know that this is Moshe Stokely, AKA Commander, social practice artist, speaker, educator, Constellation resident. It's been wonderful to work with them throughout these 9 months. I am Ariel Frost, the manager of partnerships and learning. And in a few, Courtney Cinthron will also be joining us. And Courtney is the director of partnerships and learning at Ingenuity. So this is a sort of brief agenda that we are not going to follow exactly because it's already 2:30, but just an idea of kind of what we're going to be doing today. So our interactive activity and then collective decision making for how we'll welcome the people who are joining at 3 p.m. who weren't able to be here early.
Great.
Take it away, Moshe.
All right. Okie doke. So this is a little bit of a get to know you interactive that if you'd like to lift and utilize in your classrooms, feel free to. All I ask is under Creative Commons, you cite how you learned about it. So I'm going to encourage you right now to turn off your cameras. We don't need to see you in this moment. Not that you're not all beautiful. You can turn off your microphone. And what we're going to do is engage with the chat directly. So I also am going to model this. If somebody needs to see me in the little square, let me know if that for accessibility reasons. Otherwise, I am going to turn off my camera, but you'll hear my voice and you'll have these images. Okay, next slide. Perfect. All right, for this session, you will need some tools. So either open a doc on your computer, open a doc, maybe it's Word, or a piece of paper and pen. All of that is good. I encourage you to dedicate a specific section, which can be just the top, or it can be just the top if it's a document, or I would say take 1/3 of the page and just draw a line to protect that 1/3 of the page furthest to the left. And then you'll do most of your writing when you're actually writing, not in the chat. That's where you'll do most of your writing. Make sense? I hope so. I can't see you. So please feel free to use the chat at any time if you need me to either slow down or repeat anything, but we have done everything we can to make sure you have the slide in addition to my voice. So you are going to share your responses unless otherwise noted. Your responses are going to first go into the chat, and periodically I will say take it to the paper, and then I will ask you to come back to the chat. Alrighty, next slide. we're going to get to know each other, and we're going to start exploring some things we maybe don't think of that often. All right. Perfect. All right, in the chat box, I would like you to share your name and just share your name about your name. Could be anything. Could be why your parents chose it. Could be it's related to your religion. Could be anything. Mercedes, is it all right if I make your comment public, or if you would reshare it publicly? All right. All right. So Mercedes says, like the name, not the origin. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Ariel, named for the sorceress in Thunder, apparently the snarky one of the bunch. I love it. Taylor, my grandmother's name. Wonderful, wonderful. Let's jump to the next slide.
So I asked Taylor what their name means, and Taylor said Taylor means tailor, like a seamstress. So Tailor. Okay, so Mercedes asked me what my name Ariel means. Besides the sorceress and snarky, what does your name mean? And my name means Lion of God. And I asked Mercedes, what does your name mean, Mercedes? And Mercedes said, merciful comes from the Virgen de la Merced Catholic. Mojde, you have also been asked what your name means.
Amazing. So I'll put it in the chat also, but my name means glad tidings. So good news. All right. All right. So I didn't get to I can't see the chat that I missed, but I think Ariel continued the engagement. So let's explore when first time you remember someone having a response to your name. When was the first time you remember someone having a response to your name?
Mojde says the first time they remember someone having a response to their name was early teens. And Mojde says when I was in second grade, I think, I would write my full name on all of my homework, especially worksheets, to help practice penmanship. And my teachers would get annoyed because it was quote unquote too long and quote unquote unnecessary. And they didn't know how to pronounce it.
Mhm. I think early teens, that was Mercedes.
Yeah, isn't that what I said?
I think you said my name twice, but that's A-okay. A-okay. Mercedes, too big for you. Yeah, I mean.
Taylor says, in preschool, my teacher couldn't remember the difference between me and my twin brother because our names are both gender neutral.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. And Ariel said when I was about 4 years old, 1 year after The Little Mermaid came out, I was on a beach and someone said, "Oh, you're like the Little Mermaid." I responded, "I am the Little Mermaid." The best. The best. And then Mercedes says, "Too big for you," and then also says, "No, it's what they said to me." Oh, I see. Too big for you, Mercedes. Oh, interesting. In preschool, Taylor says, in preschool, my teacher couldn't remember the difference between me and my twin brother. Okay, so we read this one because names are gender neutral. Strong. You'd think you'd be able to just attach a name to a person, but you know, it's neurodivergence will benefit of the doubt a tiny bit. All right. So now I would love for each of you, and we will also do this as well. Although I think Courtney just joined us. Is Courtney in the room?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Courtney. I already did a micro introduction so folks know you exist and that you would be joining us a while back. But would you like to jump in with us? We already shared our name and what we know about our name. And then if you'd like to share your first memory while folks begin to ask each other empathy-centered and person-centered questions. We will do that while you join us a little bit late with some parts of the activity there. So I can. All right, so now if each of us can find someone in the chat and directly, while addressing them, ask someone an empathy-centered or person-centered question about the memory they've shared. So the idea is you've shared this memory, and now as people asking questions, we're going to model and practice, not necessarily prying, right? Because there could be some like tricky feelings attached, but it is worthy to inquire about, like, what do you feel about it? How did that impact you? Because that is more interest instead of trying to pull apart whether or not there's something juicy behind it. That makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. I can unpack that a little bit more. Feel free to put it in the chat or turn on your mic as you said.
Courtney says, I believe that my name means server of the court or of the court. My parents actually weren't sure what to name me, and apparently they were in conversation with a nurse that they worked with that suggested the name.
That's dope. Of the court. We got justice in the house.
I asked Mercedes, what sticks out to you about that experience?
I have been asked, how do I feel to be told it was unnecessary to write my full name as well?
Mojde asks, Taylor, how have you managed the ambiguity of having a gender neutral name? And then Taylor asked me, Ariel, how did it feel to be the Little Mermaid? What feeling sticks with you about that?
So I'll verbalize my response to the inquiry about my how I felt about it. I felt a little defiant, but a little trapped. And so I just waited till the third grade and tried again. Began writing my full name on everything until I was once again told to stop. But in the seventh grade, I simply asserted everyone addressed me by my Persian/holy name. My first name is irrelevant to me, and it just is the thing that goes on my documents as far as I'm concerned. And because of the way that request sat, I think legally they couldn't say no. That didn't stop teachers from being problematic with me. So that never felt good. Yeah. So that's a reality that I live with. Let's see here.
Courtney says, I just have a vague general memory of people being surprised that Courtney was my name, as if it didn't quite fit.
Hmm,
Um,
interesting.
For me, I said, honestly, I feel it was actually living up to my original namesake, as it was quite snarky, as if it should have been obvious to the person that a small person named Ariel on a beach playing with crabs would be the Little Mermaid. Like, duh. Of course I'm the Little Mermaid.
Amazing.
I'm not like the
Amazing.
Little Mermaid. I am.
So we're gonna jump to the next slide, but I just want to share an observation that I'm having, and I would love for anyone to like just brain dump any observations you're having into the chat or into that left column of your notes or top of your page, where you're just gonna periodically brain dump little thoughts that you're having. I'd like to affirm that like almost everyone in the chat has been like kind of defiant about the way that people may or may not have like a weirdness around their names. I also think that it's interesting that there's like sometimes a size relationship to name, which I find very bizarre. Like what, why, how is it? I don't understand how a name can be too big for you. I think it's just right. I think it's a name. I think it means that you're meant to be attached to this name. That's my value added feedback. We're going to jump to the next slide.
And then I'll read, Taylor says, I enjoy having a gender neutral name most of the time. I get misgendered sometimes, but I also get the default they, them pronouns more often than some people, I think. And Mercedes said, it made me feel small inside, like I didn't deserve to be named that way, although I wasn't sure why. I embraced defiantly my name without knowing what. I felt it serious, my name, and I was influenced by that, I think.
Hmm.
What I'm finding now is that I really don't care about the external issues with the name, as my identity / name is grounded. I feel I could even change my name without losing who I am.
Hmm. That's strong. Out here affirming you. Out here affirming you. There's another small activity that we were hoping to get to that I think we'll end up doing in the large group, which has to do with these classics. So I'd just like to take 2 moments to just like let folks quickly just brain dump any thoughts about reflections on like the differences of our experiences with our names, some things that were similar. Just a hot 30 seconds, 25, 30 seconds for you to just brain dump, no full sentences. You're just writing in the main section of your notes, not the small section I suggested. Just brain dumping a few thoughts, and then we will jump to the preparations for the next session and how we're going to build community in that transition. All right. Okay, doke. So we're just going to quickly transition into how we might build community with the next group of folks as we come together. Though this was a small group, we have already spent a little bit of time building a micro bond together. And so what we want to do is take the next, bring you guys in as co-leaders in the next session during our get to know you in the large group. And we would love to have your feedback on how that might happen. So the first question that I have is, are there specific ways that you wish, and we can turn on our cameras if you wish at this point so that we can all just be in community together. So let me model that, turn on my camera. Are there specific ways that you tend to prefer to like in icebreakers and when you're first starting a class? Are there ways that you prefer to learn sort of little things about people? It's okay if the answer is no. I
Go
think
ahead,
we've got some
Mercedes.
frozen screens.
Do we write it or what?
No,
Say
I
once
think
more.
just talk, Mercedes. Yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
go for it.
I usually start anything I do with an activity that brings the inner child, because it allows me to see people at their best and the
Mhm.
wounds, how they react to the wounds, because the child reacts very naturally. And from there, I can infer what kind of blocks I might find. And then I move into a more brainy, more forefront identity activity where we can discuss. But once the child came in, there's this openness, that I try to build. I try to build openness, connect through our humanity before we allowed our stories to start putting barriers. That's the way I try to do things.
Brilliant, brilliant. Is there a key question that could be facilitated to bring that out of folks that you feel you have a really strong connection to?
I couldn't say, because it depends. It depends on the kind of workshop I'm building and what is my end goal, what I'm working with. Then I structure the activity kind of pointing toward that end. But basically is about, when we are kids, we feel that everything is full of possibilities and nothing is wrong. Nobody is bad or my enemy unless you enter into that kind of environment, So I kind of do activities in which that is very palpable, we all of us are one and the same in a certain way. We all have dreams, all have enjoyed. We were usually is, what were those things that when you were a kid you were passionate about, the things that you explored, the things that you loved, the things that you did spontaneously. And my experience has been that you find a lot of commonality around the group. So I look for questions that point to commonalities, no differences, because then we can face our difference more compassionate from a point of we all share humanity. That's what I try. I'm not always as successful I would like, but it has served me well. Usually usually the atmosphere I'm looking for is an atmosphere of complete safety, where everybody can express themselves without feeling that nobody's going to give them the evil eye or something like that, without me having to micromanage.
Okay, so what about this as a community building question that we can draw from what you've suggested? Could we suggest that folks share a person or a place that was a sense of safety and how that person or place
I cannot hear her. She's frozen for me.
Yeah, she just froze for me too.
Be back in a moment, but
Oh, there we go.
here we are.
Taylor, go
Between
ahead.
sessions, I'll restart my computer. I'm not sure why I keep getting booted. But my suggestion was to share a person or a place that made them feel safe and sort of cradled or supported in childhood, and what traits about that place or person brought that into that brought a sense of safety. Does that feel like something that might help build a bond with the folks in the next session?
Oh, Mercedes, you're muted.
I will invite you to, before talking about safety, talking about, for example, because safety is an issue that can bring a lot of trauma too, you know, if you didn't
fair
feel
enough.
safe when you were a kid. So, for example, what was something you did or a place where you feel completely you? When
Great.
you, as a kid, you were completely you. And what could you say if you know, if you also wanted to feel safe, what was different or similar to when you felt free?
I love this. Do we in community agree that this is one great question?
Yeah.
Perfect. Can you, so
All right, Mercedes,
made complete
you're just gonna
you.
leave the PD now, right?
And then you added a second statement related to safety as a piggyback. What was the second thing you said?
I said that what ingredients will you need to add, if any, to feel that beyond your freedom and spontaneity, you also felt safe?
Great. I think those are wonderful questions. Taylor, do you have any suggestions for ways that we can enter into learning about each other in the next session, as well as, you know, building community?
I don't. I feel like it's been a while since I taught, so I'm out of practice and I can't remember my questions.
That's okay. Do you have a strategy that you tend to use when you are building rapport?
I don't know. I think it's the maybe it's a listening strategy more than an asking strategy, but for every question someone asks me, I'll ask 2 questions back. And then they ask
Brilliant.
2 questions back. The callback strategy, I guess, is to double the questions.
Perfect. All right. So for the next session, how do y'all feel about so we'll be breaking out into breakout groups to do some building in small groups, unless the turnout is small enough that we can do it in large group. And so what we've built in community here is a mindfulness strategy to ask with openness, listen as a listening strategy, rather. For every question, ask 2 questions back. That could be the model that we frame this with. And then and then the primary questions are related to inner child. Name a person or place that made you feel completely you. And then what ingredients would you need to add to ensure that you also feel safe? Does that feel good? Great. And then we'll also model this the same way if we end up in separate breakout groups. We'll do it low sensory and just build by way of saying, hello, I am, and then beginning with those shares. Does that feel good? Great. It'll be a very contained time. We'll have the timers that inform us that we are getting close to finish. So that should help folks, be active in real time.
It looks like we already actually have 8 folks in the waiting room. Should we go
Great.
ahead and are you ready to have them join us?
I have a
Just
question.
about. If we could have a short break, that would be awesome. And then we'll come back together shortly. I want to be able to give this document to co-facilitators.
So Courtney, because of the weird box thing, I'm going to leave the meeting and come back. So that's why I made you the host.
Ah, okay.
See if that fixes it.
Okay.
Can I have a ask something? Mosh Day,
Mojde, well
Okay.
done.
when you said for one question, ask 2 questions as a strategy, when are we applying that?
So we would be applying that as we ask folks. So that's a good question. As in each of the get to know yous that we've done together already, there was a question followed by a prompt to ask folks about their answer.
Oh,
Basically.
okay.
Yes.
So when they give you an answer, you, instead of, moving
Mhm.
around the answer, you deepen. That's what we're looking
Yes.
for, deepen around the answer. Okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so we shall come together again shortly. You are all welcome to just stay in the Zoom if you wish.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our PD today, our culturally, sorry, content in arts classrooms. I am Ariel Frost, the Manager of Partnerships and Learning with Ingenuity. I'm also joined by Courtney Seam-Throne, the Director of Partnerships and Learning of Ingenuity, and Mojde Stokely, AKA Commander, social practice artist, speaker, educator, and Constellation resident. This program is a part of a PD provider program that allows our residents to spend 9 months ideating, thinking about, and developing professional learning programs that they can then present to you with the help of Ingenuity. And it's called Constellation because this creates a partner-to-partner learning network. So we're really happy and excited for our final Constellation program, which and for the help and support that all of the Constellation residents have done throughout this past academic year. We'd like to acknowledge that this virtual classroom is taking place on the stolen land of the Council of the Three Fires, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa nations.
Because of the Great Lakes, the land naturally became a site of travel, healing, trade, and gathering for more than a dozen other native tribes, and it's still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that still practice their traditions and care for the land. So as we begin today's program, let's honor these ancestral grounds that we're on and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide, and also begin to rethink our own relationship with the land and its original peoples.
So just a bit of housekeeping. If you'd like, please feel free to update your name to include your pronouns and your organization's name. Note that this session is being recorded and the slides and handouts will be available following this session. We've also enabled the closed captioning. So if you require that, you can go to more and add that to your screen. We just want to go over a few session norms, and these are standard for Ingenuity. And first we have equity of voice and learning. And under that we have take space, make space. So just think about any privileged identities that you may hold and ensure that you are contributing to an environment where everyone can be a part of the conversation. And then speak from personal experience. So that's just not speaking for others, but speaking from your own experience and your own feelings. And then how we show up for ourselves and each other, and openness to learning. So we're all learners in this space. And we'd like to make sure that this space is one for learning for everyone here, and flexibility and patience, as you all have already exhibited, which I really appreciate. Sometimes technology is at play and some things happen. So we thank you in advance for your help with that. And then use the chat box mindfully, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but try to make sure that all of your comments in the chat box are contributing to the conversation that we're having right now. And then confidentiality. So take away lessons, but not personal content. And that just means that sometimes people will share different things, different ideas, different experiences. And so feel free to share takeaways, but not personal information. And then we have some additional guidelines from Surviving the Mics community guidelines. Firstly, we cannot assume all triggers. So let this be the main trigger warning that if anything does concern you or bother you, that you can feel free to take care of yourself in this space. And then listen with compassion and trust. So that means that we're listening in a way to assume positive regard with other people. Self-care, it's okay to take a break. You can take a break from your screen, take a break from your computer, take a break from the room, stretch, whatever you need. And all are encouraged to participate fully, but no one will be forced to be on camera or interact with anyone else who's here. You're also all invited to meet your capacity of tech and wellness. And we'd like to default to they, them pronouns unless otherwise noted. And then finally, please ask for consent to engage in private messages with anyone except for me, Mojde, or Courtney, just as you would ask for consent before starting a conversation with someone or making physical contact. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Mojde Stokely for our culturally competent content in arts classrooms.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you so much. All righty. So I am very excited to be here with y'all. And before I think we skipped an important one. And so I'm going to just quickly say it in case we can't jump to it. But I wanted to just do a labor acknowledgement. In the same spirit of the land acknowledgement, I would like to offer a labor acknowledgement. The grand majority of the last 9 months of co-learning, PD prep, and of course the delivery of the session have been facilitated through the real, emotional, intellectual, and skill-based labor of Black and Brown folks, disproportionately Black women, and of the greater group, some identify as persons with disability. And to honor our residency facilitators, Courtney and Ariel, if you guys want to clap or react to that, I highly encourage it. I am pleased to open today's session centering gratitude. because sometimes it's hard, fam. I know we can be in our fields, especially as educators or people facilitating community engagement or organizing. So thank you so much, Courtney and Ariel, for all that you do. All right, let's jump to the launch pad. All right, so here's what's about to happen. We had a small group in the last session. Let me see how many people we've got right now. Approximately 16. Do I have that right? Yes. So we've got a small group right now. And I am going to go ahead and share a short little doc with them. So we had a little activity where we were just starting to build community before we came together. And now the idea is that we're going to do a shared facilitation. We'll break out into just a few groups, breakout groups, and we'll have a fixed amount of time to do a little bit of community building and energy preparing for the remainder of the session. This particular session compared to the last one will be a little bit more lecture discussion heavy and a little bit less of the pure exploration of community building and so forth. So we do still want to get some of that in the earlier session. So, all right, let's go ahead and figure out who our breakout leaders will be. Ariel or Courtney, can you identify who our leaders will be in the breakout? This is co-leadership. This is not hierarchy. And it's really just facilitating so that we can have small groups and fold folks in.
Sure. How would you like to go about assigning or thinking about who might lead?
With 16 people, I think we can do approximately 15 people. I think we can do approximately 5 per room. And so perhaps if Courtney, Ariel, and I are each in one of those rooms, and then one of each of the folks that joined us earlier could be in each of those rooms as well.
Okay, let me,
So-
is each room the same or does it need to have a specific focus or each kind of the same?
We're going to enter into the same questions of inquiry. And then if there's any leftover time, it's a great opportunity to just ask people questions about their names or their communities and things like that.
Okay, beautiful. Just give me 1 minute to put that together for us.
Mm-hmm. So those of you who are in the first session, I'm just direct messaging you what we've collaboratively created as our opening get to know you questions. Okay, I think I got everyone a direct message, I think. Oh no, perhaps I did not.
Okay, I just sent out the invites for the,
Real quick, did everyone in the first session get a direct message from me with the leading questions? Yes,
Yes.
excellent. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I think it automatically brings everyone back at the same time. The participants thing disappears. Okay, yes, it looks like we're all back. Perfect. I would love to hear either by voice. This is a choose your own adventure, by voice or in the chat. Some of the things you learned about each other that felt surprising or intriguing, or that you felt like, oh, I see you on that. Anyone can jump in.
I guess I can share. Each of the women that shared, what was going through my head after it was all said and done was very simply, we each find our safe places and places where we feel ourselves in different, it could be anywhere. You know, when we were kids, mine was a dance class. Ollie's was her grandmother's apartment. Wendy's was a classroom where a writing class. And Mercedes was on top of a tree or on her bike. And so to me, that's really, it shows like the vast experiences that we've all had. And it's really interesting when you think about that, even how it translates to when you're teaching or the class that you walk into, how the kids are all gonna have those same varied experiences. It's really neat, really neat.
Can you say just one more time that I want to, for accessibility, drop it into the chat. You had said that you all noted a place where you had a commonality, but the language of commonality dropped out of my brain.
So it wasn't common. I think that it was varied.
Oh, varied.
So, yeah, it was super varied, how it could be anywhere. It could be on a bike, on the top of a tree, in a writing class, in a dance class, or simply in your grandmother's, beautifully in your grandmother's apartment. It could be anywhere.
Amazing.
Cynthia shared in the chat, surprising was that dance and dancing the way you want without limitations could free you and allow you to be yourself.
And I wanted to add that I was in Courtney's group, and something beautiful that happened there is that each of us had something that makes us passionate about. For Courtney, it was dancing. She said self-discovery and how free she felt. She felt like everybody was in the same place there because everybody wanted to dance. Mindy with her class and our other friend always talked about the apartment, you know, how the atmosphere of that apartment made her feel that she could do and feel and be anything, and it was permitted.
Brilliant. Thank you for that share. Did we miss anything else in the chat itself? I would like to, I mean, I'm a little bit stuck on it, and it's definitely not picking any kind of favorites. I just thought it was very interesting that in our group, we had someone who beautifully described their relationship with landing in a very specific place, like flying into, I believe it was Jamaica. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to scan the chat to remind myself as well. But the way that was described, it brought a lot of memories of like how we can, or they had said that like the landing had brought on a lot of emotions, and that a friend had suggested maybe there's something related to ancestry in that place and to explore that. And to me, I was like, whoa, there's so many things and situations where I will find myself where I'll feel like, yeah, there's something about this place or something about this person that really gives me the, like, we were meant to be sharing time, space, physics together. So that just really stuck out to me as being really impactful to my spirit. I wanted to honor that. All right. Feel free to keep dropping stuff into the chat that you thought was really a wonderful reflection from your small breakouts. I hope that you did some micro bonding with a few people so that we can begin to feel in community together. I'm going to rapidly tell you about myself because I'm not all that into myself, but I do some things and it will be very helpful for y'all to just be aware of my work and so that you have a framework for what we do in the rest of the session. All right, so I identify as an artist, researcher, and educator, I am an artist, researcher, and educator, but I actually tend to identify as a social practice artist and cultural worker because, and we can jump to this next slide so you can actually see the definition, because this is a way to deliberately operate as interdisciplinary action takers, blending any combination of creative and community labor from a community-minded framework. The primary practitioners who tend to identify with either are creatives, educators, grassroots activists, justice workers, advocates for vulnerable and divested people, mutual aid workers, restorative justice practitioners, third sector leaders, which is a British phrase, kind of just means like social enterprises and stuff, and thought leaders such as media professionals, journalists, social media influencers, etc. Many of those hats I wear sometimes. I am not trained as a restorative justice educator, but it's hard to say I am all the things, right? But this term helps in that regard. So we're going to jump to the next. I do all the things from a trauma-informed perspective, which is very simple. It is an approach that assumes an individual is more likely than not to have a history of trauma and recognizes the presence of trauma symptoms. Trauma is relative, we'll get to that, but by starting with that approach, that seems to enable me to better serve the people that I work with. I also operate within the framework of servant leadership, which is a phrase coined by Robert K. Greenleaf. We won't go through all the amazing things that he talks about. I will identify that servant leadership as a phrase is not indigenized. It's not re-indigenized. It is definitely something that was created by a white academic, though for the sake of describing the thing, it is useful. So servant leadership was a phrase coined by this fella right up on the screen. He wrote, "The servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is leader first, perhaps because of the need to assuage an unusual power drive or to acquire material possessions. The care taken by the servant first to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served." So, you know, in the greater context of the world, maybe we can look at that as some of the movements like various parts of feminism and the disability movements and Black Lives Matter. Often the crux of those movements are centered around, oh, we've got someone's voice accidentally happening. If you can mute Mercedes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So just those brief examples. So sometimes that the conceptual framework outside of the actual work could be the way that some of these movements seat themselves. So like Black Lives Matter suggests that if you correct the situations that harm Black folks, you actually correct and create healthier circumstances for all people. Similarly, as an educator, as an activist and an advocate, it serves the people and thus greater society more if I let the folks I'm learning with or teaching but learning with sort of lead by what their needs are. So to be person-centered, to be in therapy they call it client-centered, but to student-centered, right? To lead through service. Mr. Greenfield, Dr. Greenfield has some language that I don't love later in his writing, so I'll just give that caveat, but that description is helpful. So today, our learning objections are to understand some markers of problematic content versus identity affirming content. We will practice the process just briefly of assessing content for programs and curriculums. We will assemble some skills to intentionally facilitate lessons and affirming learning environments. That is to create healthy classroom cultures. And for those of you who aren't teachers or teaching artists, but you facilitate interventions or things like that, it's still the same philosophy. It's about cultivating that space and equality between participants. And then you will be invited to contribute and share resources and content for a greater collected resource that will then be shared with everyone. Excellent. You can go to the next slide. All right, cool. So our agenda for today is to review content, for a little bit of content from last session. Some of the methods we chose to get materials for curriculum, reasoning and application of culturally appropriate lessons, student-centered instruction, and strategies for adaptable and agile lessons and healthy classroom culture, as we just talked about. Great. So here are some symbols you're going to see again. And I encourage you guys to screenshot the symbols, but perhaps if you can avoid screenshotting people's names, I would really appreciate that. So the idea here is if you are going to collect a material for your curriculum, let's say it's a piece of literature, let's say it's a song, a film, even a piece of text that proclaims to be historic, right? So we see a lot of text in textbooks that are all the way problematic. I have read some very funny things about the faith that I grew up in encyclopedias in my school libraries growing up. And so it does beg the constant starting with a question, right? Anything we bring into the classroom, even if it came from like our bestie that we used to co-teach with, even if it came from the principal, it is absolutely worthy of skimming it, looking at the various components and identifying where there are questions you could be asking about what is and isn't present, whether or not it could be harmful, etc. And sometimes that escalates into situations where there are great unknowns or possible concerns that may require deep research. I know we're tired, we're educators, we want to have a nap all the time, we have too many things to grade, but I promise you, once you've done it, you will mostly be done with it. You may want to re-research again as time goes forward and as people become more aware of themselves. And so society has more taller asks of us. But yes, so the idea is sometimes, you definitely start with the questions no matter what. And then sometimes there are questions that are at higher alert. And when that is the case, then you really just lean into the research, lean into asking questions in community, in forums, do the Wikipedia, but then remember that Wikipedia is user generated. So try to find other places that you can get information to figure out whether or not something is problematic. If indeed it is problematic, I think it shouldn't be in the classroom. Sorry to say, it just shouldn't be there. There are occasionally things that may be more of the exclamation question mark, semi-problematic. And in those cases, then my greatest suggestion, and we'll come back to this again, is to make sure that you give context, right? If you're not giving total context to a piece of work or an image or something like that, that actually indeed is problematic, and you've already figured out it's problematic, then all that has happened, unfortunately, the real is that you have then sent away young people with an added data point that something about that problematic thing or material is acceptable socially. So that will always get taken on, right? And if it reflects on their diaspora, if it reflects on their gender, if it reflects on their faith, or if it reflects on their communities, then we have the added ding of further harming just outright. Even when it's small, we have to recognize that it is real, and we will always have oops, ouch moments. We have to take accountability for those things, and we'll keep talking about that in a moment. Then there's the things that, as far as you can tell, because you've done an earnest effort to make sure this piece of content is actually safe and a part of your harm reducing and cultural competency initiative and intent and lifestyle. See what I did there? That then you absolutely check mark. Let's get it into the curriculum. Let's have a wonderful lesson. All right, next slide. Okay, this is a slide we used in the last lesson. And we're gonna do a little bit of an exercise where we just look at these two images back to back a few times as we talk about them. So we're gonna figure out if either of these images are okay for the classroom. On your right, you will see a very famous image from the Vietnam War. If folks are not familiar with this image, please drop it in the chat right now and I can unpack it a little bit more. You can clearly see that I have chosen the censored image, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. To the left, you have a photograph of 3 marathon runners, one of whom decided very deliberately to run an entire marathon without any feminine hygiene products. And even that label of feminine hygiene products is complex, and purposely, deliberately chose to run in clothing where it might show, and indeed it does, and then purposely, deliberately engaged in documentation, getting documented for the press. Okay, so the question is, if we were doing a lesson in history, arts, journalism, social studies, contemporary practices, contemporary society, any of these kinds of classes, would either of these be images we should redact or choose something else, or go ahead and include the image based on the nature of our lesson? So let's go to the next slide. So we need to ask questions. Before we go to the slide where I have some things that we could explore that are questions. I would love for folks just literally 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds, like 5 to 10 seconds, brain dump some things that maybe are questions you as an educator could ask to identify whether or not this is a healthy and appropriate and culturally competent material. And as you drop stuff in the chat, just identify runners. Well, they're both runners. Marathon or black and white or something like that, so we know which images. What is the goal or intention of sharing these in the classroom, asks Ollie. Yeah, so we can talk about grade level 2, that might vary. The nature of how these might be implemented. So for instance, I've done a lesson that talks about the gender and shame. That was more of a humanities course. I've also used the left image in courses where we're talking about specifically the ethics of photojournalism, and when images are impactful, and when images tell a story without, sort of forcing it. It's documentary or it's simple capture. And you might also clearly use the right image in history classes when talking about war, when talking about, prize-winning journalism, and so forth. So these particular examples, these are actually great questions. These particular examples that you guys are inquiring about, Cynthia says, what is the topic of the lesson plan? The marathon runner, what is the topic of the lesson plan? So think about these things as more dynamic, like these are tools that could be brought into the classroom, right? So what are the questions that you might ask yourself? It's okay to think specifically from your grade group that you work in. It's a little bit of an open question. And there might be things that you're thinking about that might change, right? So that it's an open question that might change based on the demographic you're teaching to or not teaching to, etc. So let's see, what do we have here? Mars says the marathon runner chose to allow her period blood to be shown. The Vietnamese girl did not choose to be shown naked in terror. Cynthia says, what is the learning environment, climate, etc. So this could be varied. This is open-ended. And one should be adaptive. So we'll talk more about that. Courtney says, do the people involved, discussed, photographed, etc., have any agency in the matter? Susanna says, would the people depicted be okay with me sharing this photo? Amazing questions. Leslie Lunning, grade level for right image, specifically for right photo. Great, wonderful. And actually some of these questions earlier, like Cynthia, I believe, your question actually could literally just be one of the open questions. So I took that as a question to me, but actually I will correct myself and offer it as a general question that could be asked as well. All right, let's pop to the next slide. Many of you are already on it, and I love that. So agency, consent, intent versus impact, who benefits and who is harmed by seeing these images. So let's take a wild guess for the image from Vietnam. What is the intent that the photographer and the newspaper had in publishing this work? You can just dump it in the chat or say it verbally by turning on your microphone. Making people aware of people, horror of war, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So then the follow-up question might be, is there a way to show a horror of war that doesn't require showing the nudity of a child without consent? Can we assume that probably, if you are stationed in a place, you probably have rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls of images, and probably images that don't leave someone that vulnerable in print for the rest of their lives, right? So in that, from that perspective, we probably don't necessarily want to do that, but why? What are the, and again, keep dropping stuff into the chat. What is the knock-on effect of the modeling? So modeling being when we do a thing as an educator, kids or participants learn that behavior or learn something from what we've presented as being correct, because we have a power dynamic even if we don't want to have a power dynamic, right? What is the possible takeaway of sharing the uncensored version of this photograph? Even the censored version, I tend to not use in regular lessons. Feel free to drop anything in the chat. I see Susanna says S pain. Allison says victims can be photographed during their suffering. Ooh.
That was a typo from earlier. It was making people aware of people's apostrophe S pain.
Ah, very good, very good, very good. Thank you, thank
Yep.
you. And that would be in response to the question about what the photographer's intent or the journalism's intent would be. Victims can be photographed during their suffering. I'm just going to be thinking about that as a big heartbreak. But it is a truth that people capture, right? When we take various courses, when we open the newspaper, when we're in a dynamic with someone that has more authority than us, for all intents and purposes, in an educational environment, we start to learn actually the best journalism is the journalism that really shows someone's suffering, right? Which, you know, there are some areas where you really have to then just grab that exclamation / question mark and toss it onto a particular image and go, is this the one? Is this so necessary? So necessary. We can't learn the lesson any other way that we have to include this. Generally speaking, if you have that level of question mark, there's usually something else out there. It's just the choice to do the additional research. All right, we have in the chat, let me catch up. Wendy says, Wendy, yes, great. I'm dyslexic, so I apologize if I had called you Wendy earlier. People in crisis do not have some rights or the same rights. That is a lesson learned. Christina says kids are not exempt. Cynthia says capture can be action. Susanna says that is more important for us viewers to be impacted than for the subjects to have privacy. And then Cynthia also says questioning the power of impact. Brilliant. These are all correct, right? These are all takeaways. And then if we add the added component of gender, this is yet another data point for a young person, but especially a young person of any gender, that privacy and body autonomy and body sovereignty does not get to exist for woman-bodied people or femme-presenting people. We don't get to have any sort of say, right? It's just one more data point. All right, let's unpack the left question just a little bit more quickly, and then we'll move on to the next. So what are the questions or concerns that you might have with the left picture? Agency, consent, intent versus impact, who benefits, who is harmed? The last question, I think, is the most, the big one to meditate on for this particular image. Go ahead and just drop stuff in the chat. Yes, Leslie, you're on it. For children, once shown, you cannot unsee this. I would argue this is very true for adults as well.
Yeah, I do too. Sorry, I meant that for the right image.
Yes, I captured that.
For the left image. Okay, sorry about that.
No, I'm glad you turned on your microphone just in case anybody else didn't. But I agree with you. These things are formative. That's the nature of being an educator. Everything we put in front of young people, they take it in consciously, subconsciously, or temporarily, and then they get rid of it. But either way, they're taking it in. Any other notes about the left picture? We'll do it going once, going twice.
Yeah, I'll say something. It's Cynthia.
Great.
So the thing that gets me, and I'm thinking in the realm of my children, if I can say it like that, those whom we actually teach. And I too, to be completely crystal, find myself fascinated. I put the words there: fascinating, horrible. If I can take those words from Dorothy Allison, there's some things that we see that is both fascinating and horrible at the same exact time. And to ask the question, who benefits and who is harmed by seeing these images? Well, that question seems like a double entendre, because we can all benefit and we can all be harmed by it. But I mean, I can't even say that it depends, because no matter what, you're going to see this from a full range view. So it tells a complete story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end in these photographs. And that's kind of sort of, I think, is what we're after when we are teaching. We're talking about seeing ourselves. Where do we feel comfortable with ourselves? And this is the same thing here. The person who is photographed is completely comfortable with themselves. So the benefit, if I was to take a look at it, could be from the stance that this person is making, or from the message that this person is putting out. So it's being heard, it's being seen, it's being felt. Who's being harmed by it? So that's the same question. There is
Mhm.
some harm in being completely visual, if I can say it like that. And I don't mean visual as in the thing that we actually see with our eyes, but I mean being completely open and free and fighting a war, your own wars.
Mm,
And trying to find peace in fighting the war. So those two, you can see what I mean. It's a tug of war.
mhm,
It's a tug of
mhm.
war with, it seems as if it has a middle, but it doesn't. You keep going back and forth to
Yeah.
find that middle. And you have to keep struggling to find that middle. And that's what I'm seeing here. So to take that for my students, I see so much that I will be able to put into my students to open it up,
Mm,
so that there could be some benefit, but I'm also aware of the harm
mhm,
that could be with
mhm,
those who are uncomfortable with
mhm.
it, and finding that middle place, that peace could come for all, that sense of healing. So it
Mm.
has me in so many different directions that I'm intrigued. That's the best way I
I
could
love
put it.
everything that you've just said. From a broad perspective, I absolutely agree. That's part of the reason why so many universities have archives of things that are deeply uncomfortable and so forth, so that we know we can capture what history has done, right? And what has and hasn't happened and so forth. And then when we step back again, we have to remember, like, we are walking into classrooms, we are walking into groups where there's a specific population. We are doing something in spaces sometimes where there's no crisis responder, etc. So I 100% agree with what was just said. And that's why these question marks have to exist, because the first impulse might be like, well, we'll just talk about everything. And then we have to take the breath and go, okay, but who and why and how do these things impact someone? So let's quickly in the chat, who just put on their, is that Mercedes?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I was just going to add a couple of things that I was noticing. First, that what you said, there are several reactions, the reactions of, oh my God, the reactions of how can we don't forget, and how don't forget makes it a discussion that can be for positive and no negative. Because one of the things I am afraid sometimes when we take stands that are very radical, even when we do it from a place of safety, is that in my very personal experience, ignorance is never good.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
the unimaginable happens. Sometimes until you are not shown something, you can believe it's not fiction.
Absolutely.
So for me, that is important. Of course, where do I'm gonna place something like the photo on the right, the white and I think context, and what level of people I am working with, independently of my statement or what I want to bring into the world. Who are the people I'm talking? Because I would like to discuss this photo, but to discuss a photo like that, I need the kind of people who can handle this in a way that it will bring what we needed to bring. This shouldn't happen anymore, but this happens and we have to be aware of it.
Yes.
About the other image, the image of the ladies, my first reaction was, wow, what courageous, I like that it's courageous. I like that, I was impressed by the two levels, the faces, how happy and united they seem, and how many rules or standards they are breaking. Then I stepped back and I thought, if I was a kid or a person who doesn't have yet the tools to make social statements or become a warrior, will that make me feel that I have to go that far to be able to be me or to change the world? And if I wouldn't be able to go that far, will I be then less than others? And instead of growing my power, my feminine power, I will just constrict it, because I will be afraid I will never be able to be here.
Yes.
So
and I'm gonna go
things.
ahead and lovingly, if it's all right, just to keep us on time. Thank you so much for your contribution. Your thoughts are already like overloading my life in the best way. Thank you, thank you. So I want to wrap up a couple of thoughts that are coming from the last two folks who've contributed. So essentially, these are both images that, depending on how they are brought to the population, right? Everything changes. And that will always be true of all of the content that we bring into the classroom. Sometimes it is in the process of trying to select perfect content, we forget that we are present. We are educators. We can bring context to things, right? And so I think that, and I say that very passionately, not because I'm in disagreement with anyone that's just spoken. I'm so in agreement that I want to emphasize that. So for instance, a teachable moment using the left image is to address the fact that we have all of these social standards and expectations of women, and we have all of this stigma around menstruation. And is that stigma worth it? Right? And posing those questions as we move through a particular curriculum. And that's the difference. That's the difference of what a kiddo might take away from something, where they might, as you've said, go, oh, am I supposed to do this? Right? It's not necessarily about providing something that is then like, you have to do the thing, so much as context. Let's make sure we are giving these resources within a framework that enables young people to take it to the next, part of their lives. Let's jump to the next slide, and then we're probably going to jump through that quickly. There's some comments in the chat from Susanna, Ariel, and Leslie. I don't think I have time to read them right now, but I highly encourage folks to jump up to hour 4, minute 3, and read down from there so that you can see those words, honor those words. Are they okay for the classroom? Let's go to the next one. All right, so I would say no for K through 12, almost exclusively for the image to the right. It would be a highly unique classroom in which this would be for sure a safe image, that wouldn't leave people with some of the things that we've already discussed, some of the data points that young girls don't get to have a say about their bodies and things like that, right? Alternately, as I said in the last, in response to Mercedes, and I think Cynthia was the other person that spoke, we are seeing agency. So as long as we give it context, we are adding a data point that rarely exists, that demystifies, disgustingifies menstruation, right? So that has extra value add to bring into the classroom. All right, let's jump to and consent. That's the other thing. Consent is very important. Last time we also talked about literature. So we're just going to go through this a little bit more rapidly. To Kill a Mockingbird, very famous book. The narrative type is a tragedy, and its suggested intention is to show the reader how bad racism is or was, considering it's a period piece. So let's figure out if this book is okay for the classroom. We're going to ask the questions, right? So in order to ask questions, we need to understand the simplified synopsis. A white woman accuses Tom Robinson of rape to avoid her father knowing she made advances upon a Black man during the early 20th century. Notes, we were segregated then. We had some extreme post-slavery disparity. Okay, end of context. Local white attorney chooses to defend Tom in court. Tom is wrongfully found guilty. The child of the attorney is cared for by a Black nanny, Calpurnia. She and her, there's a typo, sorry about that. She and her friends are fascinated and afraid of the neighbor with disability who seems creepy to them. Later, they learn that he's fine. So we have some outcomes that are not too savory. So I would love to know just if you think based on this information, which while I'm reading, go ahead and add in the chat. Yes for the curriculum, no for the curriculum, and a brief why. Meanwhile, I will read to you about this book. The writer of this book is a white woman that, you know, intends to show readers how bad racism is. So in terms of representation, we have both Black characters, Tom Robinson and Calpurnia. Tom Robinson is portrayed as illiterate. He's a field hand and accused of rape. We have no other anything else that's a character trait about him, except that he is portrayed as being like a nice person, vaguely. Calpurnia, stern, a stern woman that often seems angry. She's a cook, a maid, and focused on the well-being of the white children. Then there's also the perpetuation of myths of women survivors of sexual violence, falsely accusing innocent men and Black male predisposition to be rapists. Fun fact, the number of inaccurate or false accusations of rape are at the same exact percentage rate as false accusations for things like burglaries and carjackings, et cetera, et cetera. So there is no reason for this additional belief that women falsely accused for some sort of power grab or whatever. What are the outcomes? Well, girls and women underreport because they're rarely believed. Very few sexual assault cases make it to court, and even fewer end in prosecution. And Black men disproportionately are wrongfully convicted of rape, heightened fear of Black men and boys. It is possible that this book on its own would not create those outcomes, but it's definitely a very, very long-winded data point, right? Because you don't read this book over a week. You read this book with your class over a month or 2 months or 3 months. So let's look at the chat once more. I don't know what was the good point, but I'm glad that I had one. Thanks for that start. Wonderful. So what do you think? Is it culturally competent and trauma informed for the classroom? You can just at this point, yes, no, in the chat, or turn on your mic and add a note. Susanna says no. We got Taylor on a no. We got Christina on a no. Ariel says there's no reason I can think of to use this book. Courtney has lots of X's. And those can be kisses in other contexts. This is definitely no in this context. Not culturally competent. I'm trying to keep up. So I remember reading this in 8th grade. 8th grade, we are still on quite a journey before our prefrontal lobe is understanding how to discern types of information and decision make. Just putting that out there. Grade in school, and I didn't understand the plot until this breakdown. Thank you. I'm glad to be of service. My 13-year-old read it last year. Okay, so this is a book that a lot of folks keep fighting about keeping in schools because it does have a conversation about racism. It does have a conversation about false accusations. Let's jump to the next slide and we'll keep talking about that. If you want to talk about false accusations, golly, Ava DuVernay, like my hero of heroes, made something brilliant that is a multi-episode mini-series that is on Netflix and periodically becomes available in other platforms for free. It has an entire curriculum you can get from her website, Array. Okay, so here's the difference. We have a book, To Kill a Mockingbird, that is written by a white woman whose suggestion is that this book is meant to help us understand racism. Okay, considering her vantage point as a white woman, it is very low likelihood that she could actually have an indigenized, so from the point of view of the population she's attempting to speak to, it's highly unlikely that she will be able to have that point of view. Therefore, all of the things that we saw on the last slide, the shallow depictions of all of the Black Black characters, the problematic reinforcement of gendered, violence and false accusations and things like that. All of that adds up, and it's adding data points that genuinely we could never talk about any of these topics ever in a classroom ever. And I promise you, every child, every young person, every adult we work with will have already socially experienced those myths and stereotypes. So in the classroom, we just need to not do that. We just need to not do that. So when they see us is about the same underlying thing. It's about false accusation. It's about something that actually happened in history. It's a dramatization. And it actually gives you a picture of the justice system that exists around the accusation, not just these brief moments in court, but what is it like when the kids are arrested? What is it like when the kids are being interrogated? What rights are they given? Are they not given? What is it like for their parents? What is it like when they go to court? What is it like after they've been incarcerated? What traumas do they encounter, etc.? Now, I added this double question mark, which I want to honor as being derivative of the Spanish language. Holla, languages of the world. I appreciate that it starts and ends with the question mark so that we can remember to always start and always close with our questions. The reason why I added that is because in particular contexts, in particular classrooms, without a plan, this kind of content can be traumatizing, retriggering, etc. So that is precisely why Ava DuVernay connected with educators to create a curriculum that contextualizes and enables the images and stories being told to have greater grounding so that it is slightly less of a just huge impact. As an educator, you still need to review the materials and make a decision based on your best understanding of the capacity of your students, and juxtapose that with the actual curriculum. Take a look, do you need to adapt or add to the curriculum to actually meet the needs of the young people you're working with? Side note, in 2019, there was also a Pulitzer Prize winning opera by composer Anthony Davis about the same case called the Central Park Five. So we're gonna move on for now, but please, please, please watch and consider bringing that into your classrooms. So literature and illustration, we'll go through this one much faster, but there's barely any representation of femmes or Black people, let alone Black femmes, in superpower roles. Yes, there are some, but there's so few that we probably can just quickly rattle them off if we've ever read comic books before. And so what makes this particular book immediately valuable is representation, right? Not only that, all of the characters in the book are diverse and nuanced and high capacity within their characters, right? They're highly empathetic. They engage with each other in a way that identifies their cultural, vantage points with each other. It also does address police brutality, a life-threatening situation which the represented population of this graphic novel experiences. But what it does brilliantly is address the violence visually in a way where you are not having to see trauma porn, right? You're not having to see an illustration of the super, super hard stuff to see, which we already have been overstimulated by with viral videos, etc. We see examples of Black strength, community care, and cooperation, which are the exact opposite of the original sociologist framework, that we are lazy and shiftless and need to be, or all the things that were used to justify chattel slavery, which are not science. And then this book also lightly addresses sexism and patriarchy and supremacy through various plot devices, so it doesn't feel heavy-handed. The friend Keisha is threatened by a boy who thinks he owns the town. Let's jump to the next one. All right, cultural competence. Here's a quick definition. We've been talking about it, but now let's really understand it. It is the capacity to garner from others, accept and utilize the uniqueness of their worldview. In the workplace, it is the ability to know an issue from perspective of your opponent, staff or client. The capacity is the value added, which gives the enhanced market share and the competitive edge. So the source that this original cultural competence definition comes from is talking about the way that tensions happen in the workplace. I found it to be a little bit more useful than some of the other definitions. So we can think about workplace as our school and teaching environments, and we can think about opponent, which I was actually going to rewrite and forgot that was still in there, as just sort of the other person, the person who you don't have the same relationship with, that might have tension with you. Basically, that's what's being implied by the text this is from, and that is their worldview is value added, right? So that you can really enhance the way that you understand them. So diversity, socialization, and erasure. I won't deeply read these definitions because they're truly out there, but instead I'll just quickly talk about them. We are living in a very, very diverse nation and a very diverse world. More and more people are moving all over the shop. Even though we have community segregation, you can bet that within even homogeneous populations, especially in the United States or places like Britain, we have diversity among homogeneous group, different faiths, different sexual orientations, different gender identities, different economic classes. So we have to think about those variables when we're in the classroom. Socialization, we learn a wild percentage of how we understand the world through the things that are said to us, the things that are said around us, and the behaviors we observe, right? And so when it comes to classroom cultures, it becomes extra important because kids spend a day job's worth of time 5 days a week in school. That's where they're soaking up most of their understanding of the world and various people. So it's important for us to steward that appropriately. And then obviously erasure is when we just don't bother identifying the very populations that do indeed exist in our communities. Sometimes it's impossible to hit every single population, but within each lesson, if you can just take a moment to go, okay, I'm using literature, does every book, like, can I have variety of voice and author in these books and representation in these books? If it's music theory class, perhaps you deliberately go and find, various musicians of various races, not just the white jazz musicians. How about the folks that wrote the song? If you're going to use Elvis, well, Elvis didn't write his song. A bunch of Black folks wrote his songs, right? So trying to really bring in as much as possible the truth of who created something and showing examples that reflect a more diverse society. All right, let's go to the next one. Affirmation. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is when you make the deliberate choice to present something or say something that for someone's identity or a fact or anything like that, you are giving a value add. Yep, as the educator, I know a thing, I see a thing, here's a representation of a thing. In terms of identity, that means that we get to see a reflection of ourselves, which is affirming and helpful. Or if it's healthy representation, then it can be identity affirming in the sense that you're adding data points to young people who maybe are not a part of the same represented population, but are a part of the media that is being chosen. So let's say it's a book that has hijabi girls or something like this, right? You want to add positive or neutral to positive, useful data points about various populations as you diversify and not erase populations. Okay, let's jump to the next one. All right, why do we do it? Outcomes. Because when we are in classrooms where you have populations who are being represented, so let's remember the image of the Vietnam image of the girl running. We are adding information that may be attached to our individual identity, right? So we want to reduce harm as much as possible by providing healthy representation. Because that lowered self-worth, lowered self-value, re-upped or inflating data points of a particular idea, which is unhealthy, will only add that burden to the learner, which will actually genuinely limit their ability to be academically successful. One, because if something triggers a student, our hormones do a thing. So if your cortisol, which is a stress response and a PTSD response and an anxiety response, if your cortisol is going out of control, cognitively, you lose your ability to have nuanced thought. Your working memory nearly disappears. What does happen is you are modestly all your brain wants to do in that moment is go, how do I survive? What are the quickest ways to survival? I need to either fight, flight, freeze, or get out, some kind of a get out of this situation, right? And so that is not an appropriate mindset to have if you're going to try to learn. And I say appropriate not to place the burden upon the youth, but instead the burden upon us as educators. We need to enable and cultivate appropriate mindsets to the best of our abilities in classrooms. And that trauma, that triggering, that trauma, that data collection of wrongness or harmful representation, it lives with us into adulthood. Feel free to drop in the chat if there's anything that ever happened in the news, in a book, in something you saw in class that has stayed with you for the rest of your life as either a troubling representation of your population or something that just hurts. It stings, and even though you know better, it's with you. And then the other thing is, the more that we increase any exercising of stress hormones, let alone actual trauma or actual PTSD, or actual excited anxiety, we are consistently chipping away at the long-term physiological health of those populations. So it is very easy to find. I don't have resources for you at this moment. If folks want to ask for it, I'm glad to find and send to folks later. But Black and Latina folks in Chicagoland and nationwide in this country, and Indigenous folks as well, though they weren't incorporating this particular study, we've lost another 3 or 4 years in our expected lifetime. That kind of gap of years between other populations compared to ours is extremely significant. That means that we actually are getting diseases or are experiencing cell degradation, neurological degradation, and so forth because of constant stress and constant trigger and constant, burden of the way that society treats us as a group. And that is also true when you get someone into a higher economic bracket, if the racism, the cultural competency in their education and their workplaces, et cetera, isn't improved. Next slide. All right, so trauma. We're gonna go through this really, really quickly, but it is here for your eyeballs. The American Psychological Association says it's any disturbing experience that results in significant fear, helplessness, dissociation, that means to become detached, confusion, or other disruptive feelings intense enough to have a long-lasting negative effect on a person's attitudes, behaviors, and other aspects of functioning. Traumatic events include those caused by human behavior like rape, war, industrial accidents, as well as by nature, earthquakes, etc., and often challenge an individual's view of their world as a just, safe, and predictable place. Also, any serious physical injury, such as widespread burn or blow, etc. Trauma can also be secondary, so consider what the hearing of somebody's experience, the seeing of somebody's experience is also traumatic, or repeated capture of, the way that most of us have probably seen, at least people of color, have probably seen a huge majority of these viral videos of police brutality. Let's go to the next slide. This is from the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that psychologists and psychiatrists and medical practitioners use to identify whether or not someone is diagnosable for post-traumatic stress disorder. And within that, trauma is defined as a traumatic event that is described as exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence, adds experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to adverse details of the traumatic event, collecting human remains, etc. Specifies repeated exposure is not through electronic media, television, movies, or pictures unless exposure is work-related, developmentally appropriate sexual experiences without physical violence or injury. So I choose to share this because the DSM is complex and it is very rare that it is updated in a timely fashion. The broad majority of person-centered and client-centered and trauma specialists absolutely include the access and repeated exposure to electronic media, television, movies, etc. We can jump to the next. Bernie and Ariel, you're being such wonderful supports. I feel. So trauma is varied. There's verbal, social, bullying, microaggressions. Drop in the chat if we don't have a breakout definition. Dilapidated neighborhoods also can cause trauma because of the lack of the resource to make sure it's a safe environment, right? You will then see more injury, you will then see more illness, etc. Systemic medical disparity, food deserts, generational wealth, or the deficit of generational wealth, post-traumatic stress disorder, complex. An important thing to know about it has taken decades to get into the still behind DSM, but complex PTSD specifically just identifies when you have more than one nuanced, like specific trauma that is impacting you. So for instance, if you are a person that's experienced sexual violence, but you are also a person that experiences consistent and ongoing racialized experiences that have built into actually tipping over into PTSD, which can also happen epigenetically, you now may be considered complex PTSD, depending on how it's behaving in your neurological, psychological, and body, right? Generational and epigenetic, which we will talk about soon in a nearby thing, but that is passed through DNA. You can genuinely pass your trauma through DNA. We'll get to that. Trauma is relative. If you have someone who is low income and has always been low income and they're struggling through food disparity or housing disparity, that is absolutely reasonable to consider trauma, but also someone who is used to being affluent, if they're suddenly cut off from their trust fund or have never dealt with the nuance, like how do I take care of myself when my battery dies? I don't know what to do. I might die. If that thought pattern begins, that's kind of all that's needed for some folks to tip over into trauma. That doesn't necessarily mean that we hyper prioritize the folks with more resources or more privilege, but it is important for us to know. And I know it's challenging I know it's challenging for those of us who are either raised working class and have not so working class students, and those of us who are raised people of color, people of, you know, marginalized gender identities, etc., when we're engaging with folks that have greater privilege. But as educators, our goal should be, and this is definitely my personal value-added opinion, our goals should be to reduce harm, because a person of privilege, if their trauma and harm is deeply reduced, they have capacity to be more healthy with the folks with less resource. This is extremely important because I'm sure folks in the room have heard of things like white fragility or things like this, right? Or a hypersensitivity, you know, you say something that's very true as a person of color or a woman or whatever to somebody who is not that, like that they did something problematic, their response might be super heightened and unproductive. They'll be more productive statistically if they too are not facilitating and managing their relative trauma, right? Super important. We need the most privileged people to also heal. And we need to be on board with that healing, though we don't necessarily need to do the labor if they're more privileged than us, just to be on board with it, you know, in order for the greater society to be healthier, and especially for learning environments, because we know a majority of our teachers are white. We know, especially in Black and Brown communities. So we need our teachers that are not people of color, that are not on the LGBTQ spectrum, et cetera, not disabled, et cetera. We need those folks to be absolutely at their peak of health so that they can be resources that are appropriate for their students. All right, next slide. All right, so trauma is circumstantial. We already talked about the relatively. We're gonna go through this really, really fast. Let's imagine Rachel on the left, the white person, and Imani on the right, the Black person. For all intents and purposes, they're about to enter the world, they're middle class. A lot of things in their lives are very, very, very similar, and they're about to be adults out in the world. What is the likelihood that Imani on the right has also experienced traumas that are common to Rachel and her peers, in addition to those which are impacted by race? Let's go to the next one. Both Rachel and Imani have experienced sexual harassment and the death of a loved one. Very traumatic experiences. Whether or not it's PTSD for them, that will be unique to the person. But Imani has also experienced problematic behaviors and lack of appropriate care and gaslighting at her doctor. Imani has also experienced the fact that she, as a young person, is already responsible financially for contributing to other family members in order to keep the family afloat, even though she and her immediate family have entered the middle class. What about the rest of the family that's lived through segregation and redlining and lower pay at work? She's a part of the system that keeps the family afloat. Then there's also disproportionate debt. We are often required as people of color, well, especially Black folks, to pay higher interest rates. That is troubling. It's burdensome. Add that to the Black tax and all the things, right? Then we have viral videos that are bombarding us. Those people in those videos look like our aunties, our mamas, our brothers, our nieces. That's hard. I know that when I saw the George Floyd video, I could not see my brother's face, and that will never leave me, right? And then the threat of harm from police in her own home. Okay, next one. Frameworks. We're going to talk about epistemology, epigenetics, and re-indigenizing. Next frame. But Commander, what does trauma have to do with selecting classroom materials? I know we've been talking about it a little bit. It's because it's transgenerational. Sorry to say it, but we pass things to our kiddos, and our ancestors that are not so far away and far away have passed things to us. There was a time in history in which it was super useful. If you, cave person, saw a bear and that bear was chasing you, and you learned that bear is dangerous, you get a little protein, a little add-on to your DNA so that your offspring, when they see a bear, they go, holy, I gotta run. They don't know why they gotta run, but they're afraid, and that is helpful. Fast forward to this moment, right? It is less helpful for us to be carrying the trauma of our parents. Often that trauma doesn't actually enable us to think with our full capacity of nuanced cognitive abilities. The mouse study that is cited here, it's very easy to look up, but basically the gist of it is that they exposed a mouse to shock and peppermint at the same time. Then they did that a bunch of times. Then its baby responded to just the smell of peppermint as if something bad was going to happen, and its baby, and so on. And I don't remember exactly how many layers they went, but that was a very effective foundational proof that epigenetics is the real deal. Let's carry on. All right. So we're going to briefly talk about broad axiological ethics as they relate to this generational trauma. So in America, for those of you coming from other countries, I know that I got some RSVPs from outside of the States. This is still probably going to be relevant to the folks in Britain and so forth if you're in the room. But generally speaking, if we've had this colonialist system, which is deliberately dehumanize various populations generationally, right? With death as punishment, with whipping as punishment, with segregation as punishment, with lesser and lower foods as punishment, right? That kind of stuff gets added into our DNA and we pass it down. And so as the people of color or the people being impacted by that oppression, we are now going to have to process that with each generation. If we're not present with it, we may then have traumatic responses in situations that are not ideal, like being in the classroom, right? Might be as simple as somebody, that has more privilege brings in treats for everyone on their birthday, right? Because we can't plan when trauma is going to happen. That's why we're harm reducers. We're not harm eliminators as educators, right? A child might get have a trauma response to the fact that this other classmate does not have food disparity, thus they're able to share, right? And that's something that is a little bit outside of your capacity, except to be responsive to the child. So within axiological ethics, we're going to look at Dr. Nichols' work in just a moment, but just to define it, I don't know if you guys read it, the portion of ethics that is concerned specifically with values, unlike the portions concerned with morality and social justice. They can intersect, but they're not the same thing. Axiological ethics does not focus directly on what we should do. Instead, it centers on questions of what is worth pursuing or promoting and what should be avoided. Let's carry on. So I'm going to still keep coming back to epigenetics because I gave you an example that is related to people of color and their experiences. We're going to talk through this, and then I'm going to come back to epigenetics again as it relates to the populations that are the most privileged. Dr. Nichols has studied populations worldwide in an anthropological method that is slightly more indigenized, and I'll identify that in just a second again. And their predominant focus is how it impacts people in the United States as we are brought together into this same shared environment. However, some of this axiological framework can still be utilized and still be functional in other places in the world. So I'll just say that US framework is what we're looking at in this chart right now. So an axiology is about value systems and how that impacts the people of each community. So real quick run through European and Euro-Americans. Value system at a very, very latent and historical level is the most important thing is the member person and the objects that which they have control over or access to, right? Part of that is influenced by the fact that the European countries are four weather countries, which means if you only have so many months to get your crop going, then you better get that going, or you better, you know, have someone that is ranked lower than you to go get that thing going so that you have your crop at the beginning of winter to live off of, right? Okay, hopefully that's helpful. These are the leading values of the subconscious, the leading social philosophical values, not the only values. So for African American and Latina and Arabic folks sometimes step into the Asian group as well. So these charts are generalizations just for our understanding. Member, okay? So our relationship with community begins with how we connect with the individual that is in our life. Maybe that's uncle, maybe that's our best friend, maybe that's our teacher. I'm connecting with you directly. And because of our connection, I'm able to value and be excited about and participate in the greater community where we are a web of one-to-ones, right? Or because you value the next person, I value that person too. Hopefully that makes sense. In Asian and Asian American and Polynesian communities, it's member group. The highest value is how does my contribution, how people see me, how I engage with the world, how does that impact my group? And my group might be my family. Am I bringing my family shame? Am I bringing my family, honor? Super important. We get depictions of this when we see films or read books about Japan, for instance. That's often, we often get the opportunity to see that, like, high honor society, right? As someone who is mixed, I am half African American and half Middle Eastern. All I can say is that Asian member group is real, and that member to member is super real for me. And for Native Americans and various other indigenous populations in more tribal communities in the world. Tribal is a complex word, and I'm acknowledging that. I don't have a better word in this moment for that, accepting suggestions. Their front of center value system is member great spirit. So it is through valuing of the great spirit, which sometimes can be the spirit of nature, the spirit of the collective, the spirit of our shared energies, etc. That is what dictates how they care for community. To wrong someone that is your community member is to wrong the great spirit. To serve your community member is to serve the great spirit. All right, so we're going to focus on epistemologies. We have very little time, so I'm just going to try to give you a couple of examples of how this can play out in classrooms. Hold on, let me jump ahead so I can see exactly where we're at. Okay, we're gonna watch a quick video and then I'm gonna give you a short story and then we'll see where we are with time. I don't think we're getting audio. Thank you guys for bearing with me in my high intensity movement through some of these slides. You guys were very interactive during the side-by-side pictures. We lost a little bit of time, but I actually feel no kind of way about it. Here.
Do you want to hear my side of it?
Sam, how can there be two sides?
Hey, look, I got every question right on the final, and the only reason why Mr. Spangler failed me was because I didn't write out the solutions.
Why not?
I do them in my head.
Did you tell him that?
I did. He didn't believe me. He said that if he can't do them in his head, then I must be cheating.
Well, that's ridiculous. How can he fail you for being smarter than he is?
That's what I said.
Did? How do you take it?
He flunked me, remember?
Sam, I'm sorry. I jumped to conclusions. I'm gonna call this guy and have a word with him. We're gonna get this whole thing straightened out.
Don't worry about it.
Sam? Sam?
All right, so here we have a situation where we've basically been told by this youth that because of his capacity, actually, because of his neurodivergence, he was able to solve some problems in school, and his teacher's response to him was, "You must be cheating, or you must have done it wrong." Right? And in this circumstance, we have a young white boy and his white father who is ready to go to, put up some fighting fists with the teacher. For families that are under-resourced or don't have the time or don't have the full understanding because of this being a second culture or something like this, that fighting for that fight with the teacher is not likely to happen. But furthermore, what's more important is what are we seeing with this teacher, right? As an educator, theoretically, we should be going, okay, learning happens in different ways. And even though it would be really great if students learned exactly the way that I want to teach them, and showing me they've learned exactly in the way that I want to see that proof, it may be beneficial to look at it slightly differently. And so real quick, because this is related to consideration of re-indigenizing and being agile in the classroom. So to re-indigenize something, it means to step back and go, okay, for the population that I am engaging with, what is the framework or language or values that person is operating within? And it's imperfect. We won't always know, but we can try. We can ask questions. We can try to listen as much as possible and get answers from young people as much as we possibly can, right? So I'm going to give you a quick example of a way that there is sometimes conflict within classrooms, right? So similarly to what we just saw in this video, now imagine the teacher is white and the student is Black, whom if we just jump back up to the chart of philosophical aspects, within the epistemologies, you have different applied pedagogical and methodological ways of operating, which then impact logic and processing. So if your teacher is white, their epistemology leads to a logic which is dichotomous. That's black and white, right? And wants things to, again, these are broad frameworks. And that leads to wanting things to sit into sets in a particular way and be reproducible in a very specific way, okay? Now, if you're African-American, you will utilize as your methodology, a critical path analysis, which is not necessarily direct. Right above it, you see the methodology for European Americans, which is linear, sequential. It's the way that most of our education system has trained us to teach. You can't teach this before you teach that, right? Which is not always true. Sometimes it is, but it's not always true. And so if you have a situation where a student says, okay, this week, we're going to be learning about this particular part of math functions. And so Monday, we're going to be doing this. Tuesday, we're going to be doing that. Wednesday, and so forth and so on. And you have the kiddo, or over some weeks, right? Or this unit. You have a kiddo, African-American, that is like keen and willing and is listening, but is sort of struggling with how these steps are breaking down, right? And it's, for a few weeks, they're struggling. They're not quite getting the answers or proofs the way that the teacher wants them, because the delivery is not befitted to the way that they've culturally learned to take in information, process it, and then use their logic and have an output, right? And so some weeks pass, it's not really working. And then week 3 or 4, it's like, oh, I get it, right? So the kiddo starts doing really great on his homework. And the teacher says, how'd you get those answers? And he goes, I don't know. I just figured it out, because kids. And the teacher says, well, show me how you figured it out. He's like, I don't know. I just figured it out. And so in this cycle, what do we think often happens? Just throw on your microphone and say what you think might happen. That kiddo is like, say again?
He gets accused of cheating.
Gets accused of cheating. And what about just his behaviors in the moment, right? He's being earnest, but if he's like, I don't know, I just get it, right? What is that going to be assumed?
So he's making it up as he goes on.
Making it up and defying, that he's being defiant. That's usually how that behavior tends to be read. And I know a lot of you in the room are like, no, I would never do that, but you've probably definitely done it. We all have, we all get frustrated with the kiddos, and we have to be humble with it and then try to bring ourselves back into our healthier minds, right? So in this situation where the teacher has decided and outlined that you must provide your step-by-step proof that you know how to get this answer, he has effectively not done the work, so he's not going to get the points, first of all. And actually, by being presumed a cheater and defiant, what's probably going to happen? Statistically, what happens? Someone just throw on a mic.
He'll end up being expelled somehow.
Discipline.
Yep, disciplined, in school suspension. And any of the things, no credit on the homework, expulsion, all the things, right? Now, if we step back and recognize that the actual pathway for thinking is largely by group more tipped in a particular direction, right? We are influenced by our uncles, our aunties, the person at the barbershop, we are influenced by our immediate community. And then we're also influenced epigenetically, right? Some of those things also pass down epigenetically, not just trauma. And then we're also influenced by our environment. So sometimes people get these blended ways of operating, which is great and is a type of code switching. But if a person is operating within their ethnic worldview, then a young Black child is more likely to use critical path analysis, which effectively enables a sort of pulling apart and then jumping parts of the sequential model if they can come to a conclusion without the smaller tools. Okay, so it's more about thinking, it's about like moving out and moving back in a sort of rapid cognitive way, such that you don't need the linear method. But if you as a teacher said, there's 6 or 7 steps and I don't see your 7 steps, and the kiddo figured out how to get the answer with just step like, I don't know, whatever, like 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and maybe not even 7 figured it out, right? That's not what the teacher asked for, and yet they were able to do it. So from an efficacy of education perspective, the child has done what the child needs to do. But from the teacher's perspective, they have not done what they're supposed to do, right? And so part of what we need to be thinking about as educators is how can we implement strategies that offer opportunity for kids to come to us, or other community members, depending on where and how we teach, to come to us and say, well, I get it, but the way you're talking about it doesn't make sense to me. So there has to be room and possibility and framework and strategy, like pre-planned strategy for how you're going to navigate those conversations so that you can unpack it and really see, okay, my student does get it. They didn't give me, they didn't cheat. I sat down with them, we talked through it, they showed me, they got the answer. They're doing fine. Great. And if that's modeled with all of the students, you're not just continuously pulling out one kiddo, right? Then it becomes normalized, like sometimes, and verbalize it as often as possible as an educator. We're probably all neurodivergent, right? And then we're going to learn differently, but I'm going to use methods that make sense to me as an educator. And a lot of educators use these models, but if you need more support, come to me, or there's the Learning Center, or you need to have strategies in place. And then my final note is that within this, you may also want to consider, again, these axiologies. If a population is very, very, ingrained within member group, you may want to go, okay, let me start implementing group-based learning in a rotation, right? And I don't just say that because you have an Asian kiddo in your room. That is then hyper important to be mindful of, but because we are all ever more interacting, we are all ever more blending our axiological, epistemological, logic, and process frameworks as we go forward. So the best thing we can do is really think through, like, how do I kind of consistently have a rolling model that enables practice within each of these different kinds of frameworks to ensure that every child's sort of strength gets an opportunity to flex. And again, within neurodivergence, you may have, for instance, a Black child whose critical path analysis does not behave like their people, right? And that's okay too. So it's not about stereotype. It's just about having a broad framework and then learning some strategies for each of the frameworks so that you can be agile. And that's tough. It does take practice. You're gonna screw it up. But as long as you recognize you're gonna screw it up and you earnestly lean in, you'll practice it and you'll get better with each lesson. Just quick time check, it is 5:07 p.m. on my clock. We did get to the big things that I wanted to make sure y'all got. So I want to just open the floor real quick and see if there are any questions. See if there were any things that came up for you that were surprising biases or things that you had never considered before. Anything of the sort. I'm keen to let folks just turn on their mic, and if more than one person is speaking, we'll just respectfully ask for one person to speak before the other person, and it's not going to be a value added choice. It'll just literally be the first person's microphone that I see moving, and then the second person. You're also still all very welcome to participate in the chat if you'd prefer to drop things in the chat. So any questions you have, if you identified any surprise biases you had, or any other reflections or suggestions or additions, I'm all ears.
I have a reflection, March date.
Yeah, well done, well done. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to practice.
We all have to practice. We all have to practice. Thank you for your earnestness in saying that you do indeed need practice. Modeling, carry on.
Okay, so my question is, I find it very interesting, very complex, terrifying, to be honest, all that you have been exposing. I think many of us as teachers probably do this in a very intuitive level if we really care about our kids, and because most of us probably has been exposed to different populations and cultures, specifically in a country like this. But the concern I have, it's, how can I put this? Okay, I'm going to be so very candid. For me, for example, a person like me, I'm an immigrant Latina, and sometimes working with Black populations. Sometimes I really feel that no matter what I do, I am not the person who should be there. I don't know if you, it doesn't matter how much I want to give, how much I want to bring, how much I try to adapt. Sometimes I feel perhaps this is not the place where I should be, or my contribution should be done in a different way, perhaps helping on another level, and people who can relate more naturally because of the culture and the history to these kids, then I could somehow help get, you know, but not be me, the model they see. That has been my current what doesn't let me sleep at night. So how can I contribute without losing myself? Because the other thing is that I cannot honestly stop being who I am.
Sure,
Believing
absolutely.
in what I believe, you know?
Absolutely. So my short immediate response, and you might have another part of that you wanted to bring up, but my immediate response is that your impulse is actually very correct. However, our schools are indeed becoming less homogeneous in some places, while more homogeneous in others. So because we don't always have the power to identify when and where we can or can't be the educator, sometimes that means collaborating with other educators, being persistent, getting petitions going, like actually being an advocate and activist in your learning environment to whatever degree you're able. I understand some principals are not about it, but when possible, when you can bring as much representation in, as much interaction with groups that are represented within the student population, the better the outcomes are. Even if it's short, even if it's just a few times in a year, it makes such a big difference. Makes such a big difference, even if it's purely emotional, just like, oh, there's a professional, they look like me, and they're doing great in life. I feel good now about my existence as a person and about my time in school. My emotions, my hormones are in a much better place. I'm going to learn better now, right? And it's not as though that can always last into every day or even past that hour, but those moments are precious and very important and cumulative if we do them right. Did you have another thought, or shall we pop to the next person?
Oh, thank you for your answer. I have many thoughts, but you can get to the other person.
Very
it's my
good.
nature. Thank you.
You're very well. Y'all are all welcome to hit me up with an email, and if enough of you want to do some other kind of auxiliary session, I will go knock on some doors and see if we can fund another session so that you guys don't have to pay for things, and then my intellectual labor isn't free. Modeling. Who's the next person that would like to chat? Feel free to just turn on your mic or drop something. Oh, Mars has said something in the chat. Mercedes, many times in workshops, I hear this issue. Latinx, teachers saying they don't know how to work with Black students. Personally, I feel like our Black students deserve to be in school learning environments where their race is not an issue. My opinion is that if you don't have connections to that culture, it may not be perfect for you. That is also very true. I definitely want to honor what Mars is saying. I also recognize that we don't always have choice. And until we have more an appropriate number of teachers, one, and two, more representation across the board, we do end up in these situations. So to what Mars has said, another suggestion actually is to take the time to learn more about what the kiddos are, you know, what they're culturally interested in, what matters to them, right? And I think that that's kind of an across the board, but I promise you, as a Blursian that grew up in a very white community, had any of my teachers, or I should say the two situations where I remember a teacher taking an interest in something that was a part of my culture, completely changed my relationship with that teacher because of a 2-day experience, basically something said on day one and something said on day two. my engagement in that classroom completely changed. I wanted to be there in spite of bullying, in spite of racism from peers, in spite of parents. I wanted to be in that classroom. So that also plays a role. And I think we would also definitely suggest this of teachers that move to another country or move into a neighborhood or teaching in a neighborhood where like nobody is of your diaspora, right? Take the time, learn about the things. It can be as small as like, okay, most of the kids really do like hot Cheetos. This isn't about a stereotype. They just really like the hot Cheetos, right? That is something you can file away just as much as it's like, oh, actually culturally, this is how this particular population celebrates certain holidays or how they come together as family. They do cookouts, they do this or that. Like that is invaluable. And finding common ground where you can. That also builds that member-member relationship, because the thing that we do have in our favor as a Latina or Latinx instructor, teacher, you and African-American folks, at least broadly, share the same axiological framework. So that's useful and you can lean into it. Any other questions? Also, another quick time check, it's 5:15. I'm not in a rush. I'm glad to be of service. But Ariel and Courtney can 100% let us know that they would like their intellectual, emotional, and time-based labor to come to a close at any time.
Yeah, I think if anyone else has any questions or comments, Mojde has been very generous with their time and with their information so that you can get in contact with them, have conversations with them. And that will just be really wonderful. I also want to just let you know about a couple of things. We have just released a data snapshot for some different data points that we've collected over the past quarter. So if you haven't seen that, take a look at our website, grab the newsletter, and you'll find some more information about that. And then I know that it feels weird, but back to school is the first week of August. It is considerably earlier this year. So we'll have some different information and sessions and office hours on how you can engage with schools and engage as partners with schools, as schools with partners, and what some of the processes are for that. And then finally, all of our Constellation sessions are on YouTube, and we have a YouTube playlist that has all of those things on it. So if there's something that you missed, if you just want to hear Mojde's voice even more, you can rewatch this one that will be up next week sometime. You can watch the first session if you really are interested in a lot of the earlier community building activities, and all of our other 5 residents. All of those are also on YouTube, along with any resources that they shared and the slide decks. So please check it out on YouTube. I will drop a couple of things into the chat. And finally, please, please, please take our short survey, exit survey for this session, so that we have some more data to get an understanding of how we can improve upon this particular programming model for next year. So I will drop a couple of things in the chat, and that is all I have for today. Thank you so much to Mojde. Thank you to all of you. And we will see you in August. Have a great summer.
Bye. I put my contact information in the chat. If anybody wants to be in touch, just please give me context that we met today through Ingenuity, and that will help me bring your name to the front of my memory. But you're welcome to be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time and energy. Bye. All right.